Reincarnation is the belief that while the body perishes, memories, emotions, and even physical traits can transfer to a new life. But what if a newborn's first words were, "I'm dead"? What happens to the original soul created by the parents? Where was the past soul waiting? Should parents celebrate, or should they perform an exorcism? Dr. Ian Stevenson of the Virginia University School of Medicine investigated over 2,500 children who claimed past life memories. Stevenson conducted extensive research in South Asia, where belief in reincarnation is widespread and may reinforce itself. For example, if a person dies from a well-known injury, such as losing fingers or a skull fracture, and in the next 20 years a child is born nearby with similar defects, parents may see this as proof of reincarnation and reinforce the belief by telling the child they had a past life. One famous case involves an Indian man with birthmarks allegedly matching gunshot wounds from a previous life. Yet, the original birthmarks do not align with the alleged wounds in number or position. Another case involves Semil Farici, born in Turkey in 1935, just days after the suicide of a bandit named Semil Hayik. Believing their son to be Hayik reborn, Farici's parents named their new son after the bandit and pointed to a birthmark as proof. However, there are no medical records to confirm the birthmark's presence at birth. Stevenson's argument leans on artist impressions rather than scientific evidence, making it speculative at best. Dr. Jim Tucker continued Dr. Ian Stevenson's research into reincarnation. In Tucker's book Return to Life, he introduces Patrick, a boy whose mother was convinced he was the reincarnation of her deceased son Kevin. We are told that Patrick had 3 birthmarks resembling Kevin's medical wounds and exhibited behaviors reminiscent of him. However, the book lacks photographic evidence or diagrams to support these claims. Furthermore, Patrick's knowledge of Kevin's past remains unverified and could be attributed to familial influence rather than reincarnation. Famous historical cases that drove popular belief in reincarnation also helped undermine it. In one well-known case, Virginia Tighe, under hypnosis, described a past life as Bridie Murphy. Despite detailed local and overseas searches by news outlets, no records of Murphy could be found. Eventually, a childhood neighbor named Bridie Murphy was discovered, proving Tighe's memories were from her early life, not a past one. A more recent case is that of James Leininger. James's grandfather, Ted Leininger, had a deep interest in the Marine Corps in the Pacific Theater during World War II. His son, James's father, Bruce Leininger, shared a similar passion, particularly for historical fighter aircraft. Bruce's enthusiasm was so strong that whenever he had guests stay, he would take them to the Cavanaugh Flight Museum to admire the vintage aircraft from World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam. A strong interest in military history appears to have run through the Leininger family. When Bruce took James to the Cavanaugh Flight Museum in February 2000, despite Bruce having been there many times before, they still spent 3 hours looking at the exhibits. One of the main exhibits was of a fuel drop tank, a tank that normally hangs underneath the aircraft to give it more range. Another was a model of an aircraft carrier. There was also lots of artwork, an area where videos played, and a large Japanese battle flag. Afterwards, Bruce bought James, who was 22 months old, aviation toys from the gift shop and a videotape of the Air Force display team, the Blue Angels. James rewatched this video so many times that it wore out and had to be replaced. Dr. Jim Tucker states that, because the Blue Angels were founded just after the war, this video would not have influenced James. Yet the video refers to World War II pilots who joined the Blue Angels and shows an aircraft carrier and World War II aircraft. 2 months later in Texas, where the Leininger family had recently lived, a pilot died when his F-16 crashed and exploded at an air show. Given Bruce and James's interest in military aircraft and the Blue Angels, they most likely saw the news. At around midnight on May 1st, 2000, James started having nightmares, thrashing about and shouting, "Airplane crash on fire! Little man can't get out!" From then on, sometimes for 4 nights a week, James would wake screaming, repeating these words, Despite James's ongoing night terrors of crashing in an aircraft, at the end of May, Bruce took James back to the same aviation museum. Maybe this is why both parents should not have been surprised when James eventually told them his dreams were about him not being able to get out of a World War II plane shot down by the Japanese. When asked how he knew they were Japanese, James described the big red sun painted on the Japanese aircraft. His parents, despite taking him to military-themed aviation museums, buying James World War II toy aircraft, and letting him watch World War II fighter aircraft videos, say they were surprised he knew this. However, it's more likely that a reborn Second World War U.S. flyer would use the derogatory term meatball for the symbol that a child would more likely describe as a big red sun. James's mother was also surprised when he knew what an aircraft fuel drop tank was. This is despite the large drop tank on display at the Cavanaugh Flight Museum. One also makes an appearance in the Blue Angels video when we are shown a fighter aircraft's drop tank. On August 27, 2000, when James was 28 months old, he told his parents he had flown his plane off a boat named Natoma. His parents discovered a description of the USS Natoma Bay, an escort carrier stationed in the Pacific during World War II. In Soul Survivor, we are told that Bruce had a book in his library which listed all the past U.S. naval fighting ships. Had James been exposed to this book or books earlier? James's mother contacted author and reincarnation expert Carol Bowman, who told her that James had lived a past life and that she should tell James this, that what he was dreaming about had actually happened to him in his past life. James's parents were also surprised when their son told them his past life name was also James and that he flew a CORSAIR. This was another aircraft that James would most likely have seen at the museum or in artwork, photos, and historical videos. A few weeks later, James said he remembered the name of a friend called Jack Larson. A pilot named Larson appears in the Blue Angels video. When James was just over 2.5 years old, Bruce bought a book on the battle for Iwo Jima. He let James watch while he flicked through the pages. Bruce says he was surprised when James pointed to a photo of the island of Iwo Jima. In Dr. Tucker's case report, he says that James said, "That's where my plane was shot down." His father said, "What?" And James responded, "My airplane got shot down there, Daddy." Bruce amended this later, saying that James had actually said when and not where. James's parents learned that no pilots from the Natoma Bay had died on or near Iwo Jima. Only one, James M. Houston Jr., was killed at Chichijima, an island 143 miles northeast of Iwo Jima. This discovery led them to believe that James Houston Jr. was their son's past life. However, the evidence for James Leininger being a reincarnated World War II pilot, in my opinion, appears weak. James misidentified the aircraft that Houston Jr. flew and died in, naming a CORSAIR instead of an F-4F Wildcat. One of the biggest differences is that the Wildcat has traditional wings, while the CORSAIR has gull-shaped wings. His recurring nightmares of being trapped in a burning aircraft also contradict official records, which state that Houston Jr. was most likely killed instantly by flak, and his plane was not on fire, but suddenly nosedived into the water, exploding on impact, and sank. Houston Jr. was shot down at Chichijima, not Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima is a mostly flat volcanic island with black sands and Mount Suribachi, a dormant volcanic cone, at its southern end. In contrast, Chichijima is mountainous, covered in lush forests, with steep cliffs and hills rising over 300 meters. Maybe if James had been born into a family that wasn't so interested in military history and reincarnation, then his enthusiasm for World War II aircraft as proof of reincarnation would carry much more weight. The previous cases suggest children absorb memories from their environment, picking up verbal or maybe even telepathic information. Despite the lack of evidence, reincarnation provides comfort for those fearing death. In conclusion, reincarnation may be less about past lives and more about how young human minds gather and process information.